So you struggle with sexual behaviors. You're ashamed, you hate it, you've tried to change, but you always seem to get sucked back in. You're stuck. I get it. I struggle with this stuff for most of my life. I lost the battle, and it cost me a lot. So how do we deal with it? Well, we're going to get there, and it's probably not what you expect. It won't be some tips or tricks, not some quick fix. It's a lot more than that, and that's why it actually helps us deal with struggles around sexual behavior. But first, who is this video for? This is for the guy who struggles with sexual behaviors, thoughts, desires. So things like pornography, masturbation, fantasizing, lusting. You feel shame and guilt about these behaviors. You want to stop, but you feel the pull and the temptation and find yourself giving in even though you know better, even though you don't want to, even though you know you'll feel terrible later on and hate what you do. You struggle and you give in. I know what this feels like. Early in life, I was consumed by chasing women, relationships, sex, all that stuff. And it wasn't until I became a follower of Jesus and started to grow up a little bit that I realized this isn't good. But the pull and the temptation and the struggle, it remained. As it did, the shame grew and the behaviors persisted. And as life got harder and messier and my feelings of inadequacy and failure and shame, all that deepened, sexual acting out provided the escape, the relief. But it never lasted, and I only felt worse in the end. It really was like a drug for me. And it got the better of me. It took over, progressed, and eventually I bottomed out. My actions, my behaviors, my unfaithfulness to my wife, to my church, it brought me to the lowest place I'd ever been. As a pastor, I lost my ministry. As a guy, I lost my job. I lost my community. Almost lost my family. The struggle with sexual behaviors and thoughts and desires, it is a very real issue for men. It is for me, and I'm assuming it is for you since you're watching, and it really is for most men. Let's look at some stats about men, specifically Christian men and leaders and pastors, and sexual behaviors. Now, there's not a lot of stats out there on this stuff, but there are some. In 2024, there was a Barna study that found about 78% of men in the U.S. use porn to some degree. Among Christian men, that number is 75%. Not much different. For non-Christian men, 65% view porn monthly. For Christian men, 64%. Again, not that different. Also for Christian men, 22% report using it weekly, 7% daily. Among 18 to 30-year-olds, those numbers jump. 80% of young Christian men view porn monthly, with 30% saying they view it daily. In general, about 15% of Christian men feel as though they might be addicted to pornography. In a 2016 study from Barna among pastors and church leaders, they found that 57% of pastors and 64% of youth pastors have struggled with pornography at some point. That's pornography. But what about affairs? Surveys show that 35% of Christian men, married Christian men, have had an affair, which is basically the rate for non-Christian men. Of those, 75% reported multiple affairs, 30% admitted 5 or more. When we look at church leaders, the stats can kind of be all over the place, and understandably so. But one survey I found reported that 33% of pastors admitted to crossing a line with a woman that was not their spouse. In another study, 11% admitted to committing adultery. Another 14% were involved in inappropriate sexual activity. 10% had a sexual relationship with someone in their church. It's hard to pin down the exact numbers, but here's the thing about these stats. It's that they're probably underestimated. Having been a pastor, if someone called me or emailed me out of the blue, even if it was anonymous, I'd be super nervous to admit anything that I had done or that I was currently doing. There's this huge stigma around sexual sin and behaviors. It's hard enough to admit this stuff to ourselves. So I would take these stats as a starting point, with the actual problem probably being much more serious than we'll ever really know. But what we do know for a fact is that Christian men struggle as much as non-Christian men, and the numbers show a majority of Christian men are struggling regularly. Men are clearly struggling with sexual behaviors. Now, when I hear these stats, there's a few things that pop into my mind. First, if you would have told me these stats like 10 years ago when I was in the midst of my battle with sexual behaviors and lust, hiding all these things from others, I would have been shocked that this was true. I assumed I was the only one who struggled as I did, and I believed I was the worst man alive. When I hear these stats now, having gotten to know other guys and their struggles and letting them know mine as well, I'm not surprised at all. The picture these stats paint is not only that are most men dealing with this stuff regularly, they don't seem to be dealing with it in ways that are helping. So they end up repeating the behaviors, and it's a struggle that is wrecking relationships, ruining lives, ministries, families, all of that. If you are struggling with sexual behaviors and losing that struggle, you're probably thinking and believing some of these things that I believed when I was in the same place. The first lie, I'm alone. I am the only one who struggles with this stuff. No one else seems to struggle. They don't know what it's like. Why am I going through all this? No one else is. The first thing you need to understand, if you struggle, is that you're not alone. You are facing desires and temptations, battles that all men face. And if you feel as though you are losing the battle, you're not alone there either. Most men give in or lose the battle, however you want to phrase it. And we're not just talking men, we're talking Christian men and leaders. The stats prove it. And having been around honest, open men, it confirms it. No man is immune from desires and temptations, and most men don't know how to navigate these desires and temptations. You're not alone. You're more normal than you realize. Now, I'm not saying that because something is normal, it's good or it's okay. I just think it's okay to acknowledge that this seems to be a norm among men, so you're definitely not alone in your struggles. Second lie we believe, I'm the worst. Another thing I used to believe was that I was the worst. I wasn't just the only one struggling and failing like I was. No one else was failing like I was. In my mind, I was this ultimate hypocrite. I was a Christian, I was a husband, and I was a pastor, and I was struggling with sexual behaviors. I was unfaithful in my marriage, and I never thought I would be the pastor who has an affair, but I was. And I honestly thought, I'm the worst human alive. Maybe you've thought something similar. Maybe you haven't thought you're the worst, but you're definitely one of them. We all have this tendency, especially if you're a guy who desires to be a godly man, as Christians, as husbands, as fathers, as leaders, we quickly and easily lump ourselves into this category of the worst when we fail. I'm the worst. I'm the worst husband. I'm the worst dad. I'm the worst pastor. I'm the worst Christian, worst whatever. You're not the worst. And I'm assuming at some level, we all know this rationally. We're not the worst, but we still tend to repeat this lie over and over and over again, and we end up believing it. Truth, you're not the worst. You're not among the worst group of people. Rather, you're human. You're normal. Unfortunately, the stats reveal that men's struggles with sexual behaviors are more common than most people would assume. I know when I was at my lowest point, I never would have guessed that there were others who were in the same boat as me. But there are. Now, obviously, there are some pretty bad dudes out there. Predators, people breaking laws. That's a reality as well. And I'm not trying to minimize that stuff. I'm really just speaking to the guy who struggles with common sexual behaviors. That you're not alone and you're not the worst. Now, again, normal doesn't mean good or okay. What I'm trying to get at is that statistically, you're like a lot of guys. But let's look at it differently. If we're thinking about men's struggles biblically, we're all in the same boat. You're just like everyone else. And what's everyone else like? Well, they're flawed, they're fallen, they're sinful. Meaning you and I and everyone else is tainted by sin. This desire in us to do our own thing, go our own way, be our own God. This is the human condition. And one of the ways this human condition, our nature, affects us as men and leads us astray is through sexual desires and behaviors. And that's what lust really means. It's this distorted desire. All men have to face this reality. And accepting it frees us from thinking that some guys have it all together and they don't struggle with this stuff, and then there's me. Like, we tend to see the externals of others, and we believe those guys, they have it all together. But then we focus on ourselves and all the thoughts and all the desires and all the behaviors that are going on in secret, and we condemn ourselves and we hate ourselves. This reality that all men have a sin nature and all men sin allows us to let go of comparing and ranking. That's Pharisee stuff. And Jesus pushed back against that sort of comparison, that sort of self-righteousness. We don't see the hearts of others, so we can't rely on what we see or don't see. So we shouldn't give weight to the lies that creep in. We need to remember what is true about all of us. As my friend used to put it, welcome to humanity. You don't have some unique problem that no one has ever dealt with. You, at your core, have the same problem I have. We have the same problem everyone has. We want to go our own way. We want to do our own thing. We want to be our own God. We want to make up our own gods. This drives our desires that leads to behaviors. This isn't some people. This is all people. And this isn't some fringe belief of mine. This is straight from Scripture, all right? Look at some of these verses. We all like sheep have gone astray. We have turned everyone to his own way. It's Isaiah 53:6. For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. Romans 3:23. If I say we have no sin, we deceive ourselves, and the truth is not in us. 1 John 1:18. We have a common sin problem, and we have a common shame problem. In the first video, Why Men Struggle, I try to show how shame is behind most of the struggles we face as men. Shame is what we feel when we sin, when we miss the mark, and when we go our own way. Shame is uncomfortable, and it sucks. And part of the way we deal with shame is by escaping and numbing and covering up, aka not actually dealing with it, which leads many of us to turn to lust and sexual behaviors as one of the ways to cope. Some people use alcohol and drugs. Some use work. Some use accomplishments and status and validation. The behaviors, they're all different. The consequences are very different, but the root cause are similar. We all are affected by the fall, and we all live in this Genesis 3 world. We all fall equally short of God's standards, and we all want relief. So, why is this helpful? Because it helps us see past the very clear and very present behavior problems and sexual struggles and temptation, and instead see the bigger issue, the true problem, and the problem we all share. The guy who struggles with lustful thoughts and desires and sinful behaviors and shame, he's not hitting the standard God has for him. But the guy who seems to have it all together and comes across as pure and good, doesn't act out in ways we do, he isn't hitting the standard either. You're not the worst. We're all in the same boat. At the deepest level, you're like everyone else. It's just that our stuff, our baggage, our sin, well, to be fair, it does a lot of damage. It can hurt us. It definitely hurts other people, and it's usually the people we love. It's a serious problem, and the actions, they're not to be taken lightly. But there's also this stigma around sexual sin that doesn't exist for many other things that people struggle with. So sexual behaviors, all of that is pretty bad. That's all true. But what else is true is that you're not alone in this struggle. There's a deeper problem that everyone shares, which is what the Bible argues. And there seems to be a common problem with lust and sexual behavior that many men share, which is what the stats argue. This helps us admit our struggles, and it allows us to start to deal with our struggles in good, healthy, and right ways. And that leaves us with the last lie and the last bit of truth that we need to counter it. If you think you're alone and you think you're the worst, you're inevitably going to believe there is no hope. I totally found myself thinking, there is no hope for me. And I'm sure you have felt this too. I still do. It's such an easy lie that creeps in right when we've failed or blown it or done something stupid or horrible. And it just takes hold. I've done it again. I'll never change. No hope. What makes this lie so powerful and easy to believe is that we've all tried the different ways and the methods and the things to deal with sexual behaviors and temptations. And yet we still struggle and we find ourselves giving in and we still mess up. Typically, though, because of how we attack these types of struggles, our hope is really just in ourselves. If we can just find the right thing to know or to do or to believe, we'll no longer struggle or give in. If we just do more, try harder, be better, we'll overcome our habits, our struggles, and things will finally change for us. You know what? Maybe that works for some guys who they just need a little change in their thinking, a simple attitude adjustment, or some boundaries. But clearly, that doesn't work for everyone. The stats prove it. As I mentioned in the first video, Why Men Struggle, most of our struggles, especially struggles with sexual behaviors and lust, they're not just behavior issues. They're belief issues. Your struggle with sex, it's an issue. The behaviors are an issue, but there is a deeper issue supporting it, and it's tied to it, and that is shame. So far, you probably think that there is no hope because you can't seem to change no matter what you do. But What you're doing is you're trying to deal with a belief problem, a shame problem, by trying to change your behaviors. And it doesn't work that way. Changing behaviors can be good because you do less damage and less harm. But to see change in who you are, how you handle shame, and the lies of shame, that takes more than behavior modification. When you make this shift from focusing on behaviors to actually dealing with the shame that's causing them, you're now in a much better position to start making changes that last and lead to healing. If you want to white knuckle and willpower your way through struggles like this, there honestly is no hope. That's reality. I believe that's why we see the stats as high as they are. Not because Christians don't have access to grace or support or the power to change, but because most of us, we are still just relying on ourselves and our own might, pulling up our bootstraps, doubling down on, I'll do better, I'll try harder, and I'll do more. And I will beat this struggle. If you're still watching this, you know what I'm talking about. This yo-yo of ups and downs where we feel motivated to muster up all the discipline only to eventually fail and then we hate ourselves. This cycle sucks. There is no hope in that way of dealing with these kind of struggles, not for most of us. Only by God's grace can we find a solution to our shame problem, and only by stepping into the light, out of isolation, into connection, can we experience that grace and find the power and the support to change and navigate sexual struggles. It's not easy, not a quick fix, but it ultimately deals with the issues at the core of many men. There's hope because there's grace. Grace changes everything, how you see everything. God, yourself, others. Grace, which we see most clearly in the gospel, who Jesus is, what he did, what he's promised, what he's doing. The grace of the gospel changes a man at his deepest level, his heart. Because of Jesus, we know we're loved, we know we're accepted, we know that we've got God's unconditional approval, not because of us, but because of Jesus. And so he looks at us as he looks at his own son. Loved, pleased, you're mine, you're safe. If you believe that about yourself and you surround yourself with people who also believe it and remind you of what's true about you, you'll be ready to tackle the hardest struggle in your life, which for a lot of men is lust. When you find yourself becoming a guy who doesn't need to prove himself, doesn't desperately need love and attention, doesn't need validation, doesn't hate himself, that guy can navigate sexual struggles in good, healthy, and wise ways because at the core, the shame problem is being addressed. But the guy who's desperate for attention, approval, love, validation, who needs to escape and numb because he hates himself so much, I don't care how much willpower or might or discipline or knowledge or whatever it is you have, you are going to give in because you are living in shame. I know that because I was that guy. That guy had no hope because that guy's hope was in himself. But there is hope. It's in grace. There is nothing grace can't overcome. And if you surround yourself with men who believe it, have experienced it, who've experienced what you've experienced, and they've found hope themselves, right? They've grown. They're willing to help you on your journey. Well, if you have that, with God's grace, his power, the support of others, there absolutely is hope. There is a way forward, not just with this struggle, but every struggle that we face as men. Oh, it's messy. It can suck. It's hard. It's uncomfortable. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of willingness, but it's worth it. So to sum things up, if you struggle with sexual behaviors, lust, temptation, all that, you're not alone. You're not the worst, and there's hope for you. The stats show this is a common struggle. Most men, most Christian men, even pastors, are struggling to some degree with sexual behaviors. This is something every man has to deal with, and unfortunately, most men are losing the battle. It's normal to struggle with this stuff. Not that it's good or fine or we should just accept it, but it's common. Because of the stigma and shame around it, though, no one is talking about it. So you feel alone. You're not. You're also not the worst. It's easy to beat ourselves up and think we're just the only ones who struggle with this stuff. We're worse than everyone else. You're not. You're human. And all humans share in their inability to measure up to God's perfect standard. Again, not an excuse that lets us off the hook, but rather a reminder of how things are. We think our struggles are evidence that we're worse than everyone else, but in reality, it's evidence that we need God just as much as everyone else. Yes, our behaviors and our habits can be destructive. Absolutely. But sinful behaviors and lust, they're symptoms of something deeper, something we can't fix or solve on our own. And this is why there's hope. Most of us have felt hopeless because we've been trying to solve our behavior problems rather than our belief problems, our shame problems. Honestly, you should feel hopeless because you don't have the power to change yourself. You don't have the willpower, the might, the muster, the zeal within you to deal with this struggle over lust and compulsive sexual behavior. If you had the ability, you wouldn't be here watching this. I wouldn't be here. But you know what? We can't do it on our own. The way we've tried to deal with this doesn't work, and it leaves us hopeless. But there is hope. There is hope when you have a God of grace, and there is a way forward when you have His help and the support of others to help you navigate these struggles. That's really what we've avoided, depending on others to help us and support us and guide us through these struggles. And when we don't lean on others for help, we're not really trusting God. He designed us for connection. And when we trust in Him and trust how He designed us, we experience His grace, His power, and things do change. He gives us grace to change, He gives us the power to change, and He gives us the support to change. But don't think that this means we don't have to do anything. We do. And that's where we're headed in part 2. That is it for this video. This is part 1 of 2 parts dealing with struggles related to sexual behaviors, thoughts, desires, all that. So make sure to check out part 2, which will get more into why this is such a hard struggle for many of us. And we'll get into some of the steps and actions we can practice, which help us deal with shame and lust in good, right, and healthy ways. Thanks for watching. I'm Andy, and this is The Church Basement.